All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode number 348 of the Restoring Rapport podcast. I'm super excited for the content we've got planned out for you guys today. As always, this is a podcast for young believers who are pursuing the goal of marriage and family and trying to get married as young as possible in a healthy way. I'm your host, Seth. I come on twice a week, every week on Thursday and Sunday to discuss not only the benefits of getting married young, but I attempt to equip and encourage you in your pursuit of that goal. And today, we are going to be reviewing an article that I'm now going to share on my screen for those of you guys who are watching on YouTube. This article is entitled "The Billy Graham Rule: Can Men and Women Be Friends?" This is a question that everybody's asking. Lots of people have an opinion on. It was published on April 11th of 2025. So pretty recent article, actually very recent article. And it was put out by Greg Smalley on the Focus on the Family website. So if you guys want to check it out, I will include the link to this article in the show notes. If I don't get through the whole thing today, you can go read it there. Its estimated reading time is 13 minutes, so I'm going to try to get through it. But just in case I don't, I'll include that link that you can check it out for yourself. But let's go ahead and start. He says back in 2017, when former Vice President Mike Pence said that he never spends time alone with a woman who's not his wife, everyone was talking about the Billy Graham rule. This brought up the question of if men and women can be friends, especially when one or both parties are married. Lots of the commenters didn't seem to like the rule. They insisted that men and women can be friends. It's sexist, they said, or they argued that it's outdated to the way we live and work today. I disagree, and why my wife Erin and I don't always follow Dr. Graham's rule to the letter. We've incorporated its spirit into our lives. I know the Greg Smalley guideline doesn't have quite the same ring as the Billy Graham rule, but I hope that how Erin and I handle this ticklish topic may help you too. This is a ticklish topic, that's for sure. Everybody's got their own opinion on this. Just to acknowledge my own bias, I'm definitely coming into this in kind of support of the Billy Graham rule, but not in the way that most people are probably in support of it. I just don't think that it happens much. Like usually, as a general rule, again, rules have exceptions, but as a general rule, I don't think men and women are just friends. I think one or both of them usually is either wanting something more or perceives the relationship as something more or would like it to be something more. I don't think that it's ever totally platonic. And I know that, again, there are exceptions to this. And you might say, yeah, well, I know so-and-so. I have a friend who I don't have any sort of sexual or romantic attraction for, and I can be around, and I don't want to be more than friends with her or him. And I understand there are exceptions to the rule, but as a general rule, I don't think most of the time that is what is happening. So that's the bias that I'm coming into this conversation with. Most of the relationships that I see that are between the sexes are usually either moving towards a romantic relationship, currently in a romantic relationship, or would like to be in a romantic relationship but can't for whatever reason. And so I just don't see men and women ending up as friends in that context that much. And when they do, usually it starts going somewhere else. So, and again, that's just my own personal experience. I know everybody's got their own personal experience. And again, I know there are exceptions to this rule, but as a general rule, I'm coming in, acknowledging my bias, saying that's kind of what I think. But his first subheading is, can men and women be friends? When asking if men and women can be friends, and if the opposite sex friendships are okay, let's start by checking out Hebrews 10:24 through 25 NIV, and let us consider how we may spur one another on towards love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as we see the day approaching. Here's another from Paul's first letter to the Thessalonians, First Thessalonians, or he doesn't say first or second, but he says 5:11. Therefore, encourage one another to build one another up, just as you are doing. God wants us to have friends. He wants us to be in relationship with one another. Our marriages need community. That's definitely true. We talked about that in our last episode on the difference between social initiators and social non-initiators. No, wait, that was a couple episodes ago. But definitely go back and listen to that if you're curious on how to be more of a social initiator and how to build community in your life in a way that doesn't burn you out and exhaust you, and that makes it more stable and happen more routinely and frequently. But he says, I believe that can include opposite sex friendships, but those friendships should come with some pretty important stipulations. He says, There need to be boundaries is his next subheading. First, friendships between men and women shouldn't be close friendships, the sort of friendships that entail a lot of one-on-one contact or where you're sharing intimate details of your life with each other. This is definitely true, and I think this is one of the biggest reasons that affairs start. And if you talk to people who interview, either counselors or marriage therapists or people, any kind of therapist that handles marriage, if you talk to them, and I've talked to a lot, and I've also listened to a lot just in videos and books and podcasts, they all say that work affairs usually start when somebody of the opposite sex steps into a hard situation that you're in currently in your romantic relationship and provides something that you feel like you need and that you are not getting. Maybe that's a listening ear. Maybe that's some sort of sexual chemistry. Maybe that's some kind of, camaraderie or commiseration. But whatever it is, they're providing something that you are, currently feeling a lack of from your partner. And that's where kind of affairs start, emotional affairs especially. And another thing I've noticed just in my own personal life, like if you're sharing, I think it's wrong for a spouse, a partner. Let's say a man is having issues in his marriage, a man and his wife are having issues in his marriage. I think it's wrong for either one of them to go to a workplace or anywhere else and commiserate with the opposite sex and talk about the frustrations they're having with their partner. I think that's a terrible idea because it's, in a way, going to another man or woman for what you're supposed to go to your spouse for. And I know that your spouse is who you're having a hard time with, but when you go to somebody else, a man or woman, somebody of the opposite sex, with a problem that you're having there, and they meet you in that very real and intimate sense and try to help you with that, that's where I think you're in dangerous water. I don't think you should ever talk bad about your partner in front of the opposite sex. I don't think you should ever talk bad about your partner to, somebody of the opposite sex in any kind of context. I would say even almost in therapy. Like I would try to find somebody in therapy who's, just because there's a level of bonding that occurs there when you cast your cares on someone, so to speak, would be the scriptural language, and they kind of help you through that you do not want, that can actually impede your ability to have a healthy marriage. So definitely try to get either a therapist or a listening ear of the same sex as yourself, and somebody also who's not gonna, come down on your partner and blame your partner with you, but somebody who's gonna, call you on your crap and kind of, make you acknowledge your own personal responsibility and the nuptial mess you've created, and just basically give you the hard call, and not just be a yes man and talk about how bad your partner is. And that's never helpful. A lot of girls will get together and do this, and they'll come together and they'll beat up on their boyfriends in their girl group verbally and just talk about how bad their partner is. And guys do the same thing. They get together in their group of guys going out and doing some kind of guy activity, and they'll say, yeah, man, she just sucks. You know how she is and all this. And I'm like, dude, what's the word? It's almost like you're not on the same team. And not only are you acting like you're not on the same team with your wife, but you're acting like you're on a team with these people against your wife, and these people are nowhere near as close to you as you are with your wife, and it's totally out of line, and it doesn't do anything to strengthen your marriage. Again, if your goal in talking to somebody about your relationship with your wife is to strengthen your marriage, you're not going to say things that slam this woman, okay? I know that there are things that you got to work through and all that, but always make sure that you're trying to present her in the best light that you possibly can. And that's definitely going to do wonders for your marriage. But he says that can get you into trouble in a hurry. Opposite sex friendships should be casual friendships. Your time together isn't frequent. And when you do see each other, you are guided by strong boundaries that you and your spouse have previously agreed to. I think the one-on-one thing is good. I don't think spending one-on-one time with the opposite sex is, generally a good idea. Then people will throw in, I haven't even brought up the homosexuality thing. What if my friend is gay and all this? And it just seems to be like, it seems to be a battle that people are dying on the hill of. And it's almost like, instead of dying on the hill of whether or not you should be doing this in your marriage, hanging out with friends of the opposite sex in a one-on-one setting, why are you not fighting that hard to protect your marriage from anything that could damage your ability to connect to your partner? Because that's really what if you want to have a healthy marriage, you don't need to have a bunch of these other goals that become more of a priority to you than having a healthy relationship with your spouse. And a lot of people will sacrifice a healthy connection with their spouse just to try and be right on this issue of whether or not it's moral to hang out with people of the opposite sex in a one-on-one setting while you're married. And it's like, it doesn't really matter, because if you want what's best for your marriage and there's something that's bothering your marriage, you give up that thing that's bothering your marriage. You quit, you stop, you do whatever it takes to make sure the marriage is flourishing, I guess is the word. I don't know. That's just my thoughts on it. Second, he says, and really this should go without saying, those friendships should be completely out in the open. I definitely agree with that. No secrets, no sneaking or skulking around. If you're hiding a relationship from your spouse, that should set off some serious alarms. If you're hiding anything from your spouse, I mean, that... There's this thing I'm realizing. People think it's so common to keep secrets, and they don't say it like that. They don't think of it like that, but they'll say things like, don't tell anyone this. Don't tell anyone. And they're telling that to somebody who's married. And I'm like, that is such bullcrap. This person is, one with another human being, and God's designed them to be one with that person. You're telling them to keep a secret with you, a person who's not one with them, instead of sharing that with their spouse. And I just think that's such a red flag. Don't do that, guys. Don't ever tell a partner to keep a secret from his or her spouse. Don't ever do that. That's literally just coming in between a union and saying, I want this thing that I'm telling you to stand in between you two and to be a secret that we share, something that we have in common that you never should have with your spouse. And that's just so affronting. Like, your spouse is the person who's closest to you in the whole world. There should be nothing, that's between you and other people and not between you and your spouse. That is not okay. He says, third, not only should your spouse know, but your spouse should bless the friendship. You need to give your husband or wife the trump card. If they feel the relationship is a problem, then guess what? It is. I agree with this, because again, what's the priority here? The connection with you and your partner should be the priority. If you want a happy marriage, that's the priority. So even if it's not morally wrong for you to hang out with a person of the opposite sex, and even if there's nothing going on there, if it bothers your partner, end it. It says, never tell your spouse that he or she is paranoid or jealous. Don't shut the conversation down. Talk it through. Even if a friendship is the problem, you should end it immediately. I agree. I absolutely agree. And people will say, well, you shouldn't change yourself for another person. And I'm like, you absolutely should change yourself for another person. Again, if preserving yourself is your goal, then a marriage is not going to agree with you, friend. Marriage is about maturing, laying your life down for your partner, serving them, making them comfortable, pampering them, treating them as Christ treated the church. And that is not preserving your personal autonomy and independence and desires and hobbies and wishes. That's not what it's about. So yeah, I absolutely agree with that. You should have. There's a lot of stuff about you that needs changed, sweetheart. So just and I get that it's hard. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about me that needs changed too. But yeah, you should definitely be willing to change yourself. Even if you're right on an issue, you should be willing to change yourself, because again, if it's hurting your marriage, it's hurting you. These aren't easy conversations to have with your spouse. It's easy to become angry, defensive, or dismissive, and trust me, I know all about how these talks can go wrong. An example from our marriage, twice in our marriage, Aaron has come to me with concerns about my friendships with female coworkers, neither of whom work at Focus on the Family, by the way, and frankly, I responded defensively both times. Don't you trust me? I asked her, what do you think I am, an idiot? Those obviously not good examples of how to respond to your spouse who has a concern. Obviously, if your spouse has a concern, they're not... If your ultimate goal is having a healthy marriage, you're about making them comfortable, right? You're about taking care of them. You're about serving them. You're about doing whatever it takes to preserve the connection between you and this person. So obviously these lesser issues are going to be things that I would hope you would get rid of without too much of a struggle. He says, I interpreted her concern as an indictment of me. She doubts my integrity. I thought many spouses respond in a similarly defensive way. They take the concerns personally or place all the blame on the other person, calling him or her jealous, controlling, or paranoid. All that insecurity, blame, and defensiveness, it leads to even more relational disconnect and often to a full-blown fight, just like it did for Aaron and me, and that only reinforced Aaron's concern and fear. Yeah, so I can see this is a very complicated issue, but again, I think it can be simple. Like, is your marriage the thing that you're protecting most, or are you protecting this other thing on the side, this other friendship or this other app or this other connection at work, whatever, more than you're protecting your marriage? Because if you are, I mean, that's you're just saying with your actions, because actions speak louder than words. You're saying with your actions that there are things that you value taking care of more than your own marriage. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's hurting your marriage, so get rid of it. If your spouse raised concerns, you might think about it this way. You can be a great driver, but it still doesn't hurt to have a car with anti-lock brakes. You can be a talented woodworker, but you still wear safety glasses when you're working with a lathe. And it's the same with opposite sex friendships. Safety first. Aaron needs some extra assurance that I dismissed in that moment. Eventually, we were able to sit down and talk about the real issue. I put aside my defensiveness and was able to sincerely hear what Aaron was telling me, and we were able to establish healthy boundaries in our marriage. From that conversation, I was able to talk about having some good, strong boundaries with women at work. I don't like the word boundaries in terms of a marriage. I know that I'm probably out of if you talk to marriage therapists, they'll probably definitely disagree with me on that. But like in my own personal marriage, I don't like to use the term boundaries because I don't really have boundaries with my wife, because boundaries are for people who are harming you and who are not on your team and who are basically out for your demise, or who might abuse you in order to get what they want. And that's not a marriage. That's not what my marriage is. I don't need boundaries with my wife in order to protect myself, because basically I chose well on the front end. And so I don't like using the term boundaries with my wife, because it's really, again, saying there's levels of my life that you don't have access to. I have rules that if you break, I'm going to respond either negatively, or I'm going to withdraw for you, or some other thing that's just not the appropriate way to do what Christ has called you to do in your marriage. But his next subheading is, can men and women be friends? Here are some guidelines. I mentioned the word boundaries a couple of times already. Just what exactly do those boundaries look like in opposite sex and friendships? Again, I'm fine with boundaries in terms of like opposite sex friendships and other kind of relationships, but not with marriage, because again, those other kinds of relationships are, with people who could potentially be not have your best interest at heart, and who could accidentally hurt you. And I know your marriage could accidentally hurt you as well. But boundaries to me is like protecting something important, is what it suggests. And I don't think my wife needs to be protected from anything important that I have. Again, because she's on my team and she's actually laying her life down for me. She's interested in what is best for me on a level that nobody else is. And so I don't know. There's something in me reacts to that term. If you want to hear more about it, I did an episode called Why I Don't Have Boundaries with My Wife. You can go back and listen to that as well. But number one, it says, make your relationship with your spouse a priority. No relationship, even the one you share with your husband or wife, can be your everything. No one person can fulfill every relational need, but tending to the relationship you have with your spouse should take precedence over every other relationship you have outside the family. True. Number two, cultivate and maintain your same-sex friendships. Those should make up your most close, rewarding friendships. I agree with this for sure. I think there is something about having some men around you, if you're a man, that are in your similar situation, and who are fighting for your marriage and not supplanting it or undermining your wife in order to make you feel good. Number three, build shared social networks with your spouse. Invite your opposite sex friend to dinner along with his or her spouse as a guest. Go to baseball games together instead of nurturing friendships with a woman or a man outside your marriage. It is better to befriend a couple where you can all get together and share life and companionship. I think that's also good. Number four, be careful about your interactions. Don't take an opposite sex work colleague out to lunch alone, and never take a business trip with only him or her if you can help it. If you can't avoid these situations, build some strong boundaries. If you're interacting with an opposite sex friend or colleague, worker online, make sure there's a legitimate reason for the communication. To be blunt, I don't think you have any business casually texting the opposite sex, but if I'm trying to banter or joke, I always make a point to include others and make it a group text. That's just being safe. Number five, take honest stock of yourself, he says. Be aware of your own weaknesses and vulnerabilities and heed warning signs that this friendship might be veering into dangerous waters. For instance, do you ever fantasize about your quote-unquote friend? Are you exchanging highly personal information with him or her? This is the big dangerous one, because a lot of people don't realize that a level of bonding occurs when you share vulnerable details about yourself with somebody, and where, as he says, highly personal information. Or any kind of classified information or any kind of sensitive information, when you share those with people, that vulnerability creates a level of bonding that you don't want to have with anybody outside of your marriage. So be very, very careful sharing details with the opposite sex out of sight of your marriage. I think that's just wisdom. That's just kind of common sense. Number 6, setting guidelines for how you should behave around members of the opposite sex. Ask these questions. How do you feel about the opposite sex friendships in our marriage? How might they be appropriate and helpful? What would make them inappropriate? How do you feel about opposite sex relationships at work? How might these how might these be different from outside of work friendships? Yeah, a lot of it's the work thing. The work thing keeps coming up because, yeah, guys, we go and spend 8 hours a day outside our home with a place that is not just individuals of our same sex. We go and we spend time at work with, men. We go and spend time at work with women. I'm in a profession where like probably 80, 90, 95 even percent of my coworkers are women because I'm a teacher. And the teaching field is just dominated by women in the younger grades that I teach. And so that's just part of the job. But this is never a problem that I'm going to have. I think because those boundaries that he mentioned before, boundaries that, again, I don't like using the word boundaries with my wife, but I do think boundaries are important with other kinds of relationship because, again, those people are more dangerous to you. And so, again, just some that I have, I don't really, as a married man, I don't really spend any kind of one-on-one time with individuals of the opposite sex if there's nobody in the same room. And if people like just leave us in a room, I'll usually start meandering my way out or exiting the conversation politely, of course, because I think that's just a good idea. Never sharing personal details that I wouldn't share with other types of relationships that I have at work. I'm not going to share more of myself to a woman at work than I share with other people, than I would be willing to share with anyone, man or woman, at work, and that I have shared with both men and women at work. I'm not just going to, like, for example, I'm not going to share something that I'm really having a hard time with just one person who is a woman at work. I would never do that. Because again, that's just kind of where something can go wrong and a level of bonding can happen that could undermine your marriage and affect your ability to connect with your spouse and impact your ability to be comfortable too. And so those are just some rules. Be aware of who you're spending one-on-one time with and be aware of what you're talking to people about when spending one-on-one time with them is absolutely demanded. Although I think there is a strong argument that it is never absolutely demanded. You don't ever actually have to spend one-on-one time with a person of the opposite sex outside of work. And so, yeah, just be aware of what you're talking about, sharing personal details, vulnerable information, struggles that you're having as a person. That's going to create a level of bonding, again, that's dangerous for your marriage. What rules, he says, do you feel are important to have in an opposite sex friendship at work, outside of work? Those are some that I just told you that I have. The spirit behind these guidelines is important, and you should incorporate that spirit into your marriage when deciding if men and women can be friends. No friendship, new or old, is worth damaging your relationship with your spouse. True. That's like the best sentence that he's had in this article. A lot of people are under the impression that if you've been friends a long time with somebody, once you get married, that your spouse should have no right to ask you to cut back on those friendships or end those friendships or in any way treat those friendships differently than you want and have done for 20 years. And I think that's wrong. I do. Sorry. Hate to be, what's the word? Just kind of not in your face, unconventional or maybe confrontational or against what, makes you comfortable. But I do think that's true, guys. Your spouse, if they are bothered by any kind of friendship you've had, regardless of how long that friendship has been going or whether or not there's any chemistry there or anything, it doesn't matter. If your partner's bothered by something, you get rid of the problem. Because again, that's saying this marriage to me means more than any other thing that could potentially get in the way. His next subheading is one woman's response to former Vice President Pence's commitment to follow the Billy Graham rule. A few years ago, social media exploded over resurgence of a 2002 article concerning the stance that Mike Pence chose to take in his marriage. At the time of the writing, Pence and his wife Karen admitted to following a principle similar to the Billy Graham rule, in which Dr. Graham acknowledged his commitment to never eat alone with another woman or attend an event where alcohol is being served. I did not know that one. So he said that he's not going to, let me read that again. Dr. Graham acknowledged his commitment to never eat alone with another woman. That one makes total sense to me. Or attend an event where alcohol is being served. That is a lot more extreme to me than I don't really even see how that's related to this issue. Maybe it's not related to this issue. And it might be a separate conviction that he had, because I don't think that's necessarily related to affairs starting, because those are usually things that start in private through a one-on-one conversation. It doesn't really matter if alcohol's there or not. Now, alcohol might, impact. Well, I'm sure it would impact. But again, if you're in a group setting, I don't see how the affairs are starting as easy there. Now, maybe they are, but again, I think it's usually through a one-on-one interaction, maybe where you guys break off from the group or something like that. But, yeah. Anyway, he says, I've noticed that many of the articles I've read concerning President Pence's declaration, individuals have expressed concern about how this perspective could devalue women, portray women as sexual objects, or keep them from advancing professionally. Again, advancing professionally should be a secondary goal to when compared to preserving your marriage connection. Doesn't matter as much, frankly. Portraying women as sexual objects, I don't really understand that one as much. I don't understand how having a boundary about not eating with a woman outside of your marriage portrays that woman as a sexual object. I'm not making that connection, but he's saying it could devalue women. I also don't understand that connection. It has nothing to do with the woman. It's about honoring a code that protects, the most important woman in your life, really. And so I'm not making that connection. But he says, amid the condemnation and judgment that exploded across our country, it would seem that few people took the time to really understand the meaning, motive, or impact of the Pence's stance regarding their marriage. Maybe, just maybe, we can all learn something from them. Maybe we can begin to see some of the benefit in honoring marriage as an institution. At the same time, we commit to taking a stand for our personal marriage convictions. How can the Billy Graham rule be beneficial to marriage? Hebrews 13:4 says, marriage should be honored by all, and the marriage bed be kept pure, for God will judge the adulterer and the sexually immoral. The directive in this verse is clear. Honor marriage, including your own. Value marriage. Make your marriage a priority. Absolutely. Agree with that verse 100%. And that sentence he said 100%. As married couples, our behavior should be an indicator of what we value. Therefore, it should be apparent to others that we value our marriage on a personal level and value the covenant marriage on a general level. I believe that we do this best by choosing to believe in ways that would not leave others, even bystanders, wondering if we are truly committed to our marriage relationship. Again, that's such an awesome thing. Behave in such a way that nobody, including your spouse or anybody outside of your marriage, is questioning your commitment to your relationship. That's how you should behave. That's the only correct way to behave in your marriage. Again, I'll say it again. That's a great sentence that he wrote there. Behave in such a way that nobody outside or inside your marriage questions your commitment to your marriage relationship. That is a wonderful, wonderful thing to do, man. Live above reproach. Above reproach. Don't even put yourself in a situation where you could be perceived as someone who is questioning his commitment to his marriage. Don't even put yourself in a situation where you could be perceived as somebody who is not honoring his wife and his wife's comfort. So that's awesome. Really good. I like that sentence. Consider how you would feel if you saw your neighbor out to lunch with a female friend and they were laughing, giggling, maybe even flirting. Would it make you wonder how his wife would feel if she were walking upon this scenario? If this were my husband, I know I would struggle with what I was seeing. So the question comes down to this: would this kind of interaction with someone of the opposite sex benefit my neighbor's marriage or create a moment of doubt with his wife? Would my neighbor ultimately be honoring his marriage? With an example like this in mind, I can see the value of establishing boundaries in marriage, especially with friendships between men and women. Again, I don't think boundaries are necessary if keeping your connection with your partner is your ultimate goal. Because again, if let's use my own personal marriage as an example. If something were to bother my wife, we don't need to have talked about our rules for how we're going to act in that situation. If she tells me, hey, it bothered me when you did this, I immediately don't do that anymore. Or if she says it bothers me that you're friends with this person on Facebook, I'm immediately unfriending that person. Okay? If she says it bothers me that you follow this account on your podcast channel, that account is immediately unfollowed, because keeping my connection with my wife, my top priority, is my top priority. And so I'm going to do whatever it takes in order to not let these small things come in the way of that. Boundaries and rules, and talking about rules of how you're going to interact with people outside your marriage, with your partner, are only necessary if you're unwilling to do whatever your spouse kind of wishes. And I just think you should do whatever your spouse thinks, man. Just do whatever your spouse thinks. That's your most important connection here when compared to these other types of relationship. And I mean, so why would you not? Why would you want rules around that when your one rule should be protecting and preserving your own marriage. If it's bothering your wife, if it's bothering your husband, you fix the problem. You don't fight for whatever it was that was bothering your partner. You get rid of it because that's not your priority. Your priority is keeping your connection with your spouse whole. He says, personally, I want to be very careful with what I say and what I do in order to honor my marriage. I want to see others through my words and deeds. That marriage is not only a good thing, it's a great thing. Guidelines in a marriage relationship are not uncommon. Again, I think the only guideline that you really need is keeping your marriage connection your priority. Because all the other rules, like we're only going to hang out with individuals of the opposite sex this many minutes a week and only in this context and not if it's this person, not if that's... All those rules are irrelevant and unnecessary if you simply say, anything that bothers you, honey, is gone. It's gone. Anything. Let me know. Anything at all is gone. That's really the only guideline you need, I think. Tell me if you guys have a different perspective than what I'm saying, or if you foresee a problem with what I'm saying or anything like that. I definitely want to hear from you. You can do that through the YouTube comment section. But honestly, that's just what I think right now, man. Seems to be working for me great so far. Anything that bothers my wife, gone. Married couples intuitively understand that if one spouse chooses to behave in a manner that brings only individual satisfaction in the marriage, the behavior will obviously have a negative impact on the relationship. Therefore, whether or not it involves a formal discussion, many couples have had some sort of code of conduct. Again, I think that's irrelevant. Your only code of conduct should be, if it bothers your spouse, it's gone. But it says your boundaries may not look like identical to those of Vice President Pence or Billy Graham, but you can probably understand acceptable limits. Again, limits acts like it assumes it. What's the word? It starts with an I. Oh gosh, I can't even think of it. But it makes people think. It makes even portrays you as being somebody who wants to do things that your spouse doesn't want, being somebody who wants to, keep these relationships that bother your wife, being somebody who wants to go out and do something that bothers your spouse. And I think you're just openly acknowledging at that point that your relationship with your spouse is not your ultimate priority. That's really the only code of conduct, as he would say, or rule that you need. I know I've said that like 10 times, but it really does fix all these issues. I don't think you need a code of conduct other than if it bothers my wife, it's gone. It's gone. A lot of married couples will tell you that marriage is the most wonderful thing they've ever experienced, as well as one of the most difficult things they've ever experienced. With that in mind, I don't think it's one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced. I think that's kind of an overstatement. I know I'm only like 2 years into my marriage, but marriage was the best decision outside of following Jesus Christ that I've ever made in my entire life. And so I react to anything that portrays marriage as a less of a good deal for men or women than it is. I actually think it's one of the best ways that you can possibly live your life for like 99% of people, other than the people God has called to singleness and given the gift to them to remain single. But with that in mind, he says it's understandable why having clear expectations of appropriate behavior is helpful to both husband and wife, especially when their relationship needs to be guarded during seasons of difficulty. The Smalley rule. Here's his rule with his wife. He says, my husband, Greg, and I have our own set of guidelines that we have followed for the past 25 years. Although our boundaries may not be quite the same as the Billy Graham rule, we've committed to what we call our own Smalley rule. And here are the 3. Never be in a home alone with a friend of the opposite sex. Don't socialize alone with a member of the opposite sex. Don't travel alone with someone of the opposite sex. All great rules. Socialize is the key word here because at work, sometimes he might or she might work in a situation where they have to be alone with a member of the opposite sex. But again, I don't even think that's... maybe for some jobs it's necessary. For my job, that's never necessary. I never have to be alone with a member of the opposite sex, ever. Literally ever. I've taught for 3 years now? Well, I subbed for 1 year, then taught full-time for 2, and I've never had to do that, not even one time. So, I don't know. Other than like a insurance meeting or something like that, maybe. That might have happened 1 or 2 times, but my point is it doesn't come up much. It's usually not even asked of you in your workplace to not socialize, even be in the same room with somebody of the opposite sex. I don't think that happens much. Now, maybe somebody who of a different job than me, like somebody who, I don't know, is a counselor or a therapist or something like that. That might happen a lot for them, or I don't know, something like that. But I don't know. Again, if something bothers your wife, you get rid of it. I think that's the real rule that matters here, because she's the priority. She's the priority. And, maybe there are some people out there who are so sensitive and they get, mad and frustrated about things that are nothing and all this. But I feel bad for, what's the word? Sort of enabling that person to sort of be a tyrant over their own relationship. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, you married this person. You knew what this person was like. You knew who this person was. You knew what they were comfortable with. At least you should have if you asked the right questions before you got married. And you chose to marry them. So why are you, when they're telling you they're bothered by something, why are you throwing such a fuss? Kicking and screaming while you do what they want, instead of like just saying, absolutely, if it bothers you, it's gone, sweetheart. Because your partner needs to be totally confident in you. And there's nothing that makes them totally confident in you than just you doing what makes them comfortable here. I don't think it's rocket science, He says, because this, or she says, because this has been a work in progress for us, Greg and I have also agreed that if an awkward situation comes up, we will have open discussions in order to arrive at a mutually agreed upon solution. Guidelines create emotional safety in a marriage. Her next one is examples of boundaries for friendships between men and women. Boundaries between friendships is going to be interesting. I'll read that one because that is applicable to our question at the beginning. Can men and women be just friends? She says, why not put boundaries in place so that your own moments of weakness or temptation, you already have a guide rail protection in place? Consider a few of the following guide rail examples. Leave the door open when one of you is in a meeting with a person of the opposite sex. I think that's a great rule. Be sure that there's a window in your office so that interactions with other people are visible. I think openness is a great rule. Something I do in my classroom, guys, I don't really ever, unless I'm teaching and I would disturb other classrooms by the noise coming out of my classroom, I don't ever shut my door. My door is always open for either students or teachers who need something, if they want to come in and ask me a question or anything like that. But there's never any time where I'm in an enclosed space with somebody in a one-on-one situation. It's always just everything I do is open. Might as well be in the hallway because it's, way better visibility, but you get the point. Everything is open. There's no boundaries or walls between anything that I'm doing. So that's a great way to, again, keep yourself above reproach. I think is great. But when you're talking to somebody of the opposite sex, she says, steer clear away from conversations about frustrations you may have with your spouse. That is absolutely true. That is absolutely true. Never have I ever, and never will I ever, talk about a frustration I have with Lainey to a member of the opposite sex who's my age. That is literally, I think, a recipe for disaster. And I think this is, I don't hesitate to forward this rule to every marriage across the world, but I do think this is a good one. This is a contender for just being universally a good idea. I think you should, it doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter, anything like that. And again, I'm not giving advice to people who are above me or anything like that. I'm just saying, let me just make it personal. I think for me, this is a great idea. Never having a conversation with somebody else of sex about a frustration or issue you're having with your wife in a one-on-one setting. I think that is a really, really good idea. It says, be aware of your own feelings or secret desires when a member of the opposite sex walks into a room. Very few people would admit to having been involved in intentional pursuit of an extramarital affair, sorry. But many confess to feeling a connection with somebody else of the opposite sex, and then the relationship just gradually began to form. But it's like, no, the relationship doesn't just gradually begin to form unless you are feeding that relationship, watering it, nurturing it, and allowing opportunities where conversation can happen. If you don't allow those things to happen, then even if there is that attraction, it never goes anywhere. And so that's really there's that point of decision. It's a lot of bad decisions leading up to an actual affair. An affair starts with 100 bad decisions before you actually have sex with somebody outside of your marriage. It's a long list of, bad things. So just don't even start the first bad decisions, and you never even get to the actual physical adultery. So yeah, but he says, while they thought that a man and woman could be just friends, things went past the boundaries. Again, that's said in such a passive sense, like things went too far. It just happened. This is how it turned out. It's like, no, you chose to make a bad choice. Personal responsibility. This didn't just happen. You didn't get knocked out and become a puppet of somebody who made you do these terrible things. You decided to do them. Okay. So even if you didn't think about what you were doing, it doesn't matter. You chose. This is on you. You're the one in control of your body. You're the one in control of your words. You're the one in control of your choices. So like, let's keep that clear. It didn't just happen. Things didn't just go past the boundaries. You went past the boundaries. She says the potential destruction of an extramarital affair can have on a family is immense. And that is definitely true. I've seen that in my own life. She says, I am not saying that every interaction with a person of the opposite sex isn't a fair waiting to happen or even a sexual temptation. However, having boundaries around all your interactions will help you avoid dangerous attractions and lead you to safety when it's needed. What are some of the benefits of protecting your marriage? Well, man, I'll tell you one. If your spouse knows and you know that your number one priority and your spouse's number one priority is protecting the marriage connection, it is such a relaxing way to live. It is so, what's the word? You're just comfortable. You're just comfortable. You're never anxious. You're never worried. You're never having a hard time trusting your partner. You're never having a hard time trusting yourself because you know my marriage is my top priority. And neither I nor my spouse would ever do anything to jeopardize that top priority. And if something were to happen that bothered my partner, I would immediately fix that without any questions asked, without defensiveness, without trying to hold on or cling to that thing that's bothering my partner, because my connection with my partner is my top priority. If you can go into marriage saying that, man, you are set up for success. And not only success, but this question is asking what are the benefits of protecting your marriage. It makes you so comfortable. There's a peace there that I would just love for everybody, all the young people listening to this, to experience in your future marriage. There is such a peace when you know that your partner's top priority is protecting her connection with you, and you obviously have the same goal. Man, it's such a peaceful way to live. Beyond the social impact of marriage, it is simply an amazing experience. There are so many benefits to having somebody stand by you during both the challenges and joys of life. That's definitely true. There's nothing like fighting, back to back with somebody towards a common goal. I've found that there is nothing like having your best friend to fall asleep with and wake up beside. It's a beautiful thing to know and be known. True. She says, because one of us chooses to be proactive in different areas of life, health, fitness, finances, etc., I wonder why married couples would not be proactive in the building of a healthy marriage. Both husbands and wives should protect the amazing gift of marriage in their own lives. So even if you don't want to follow the Billy Graham rule, why not discuss how you and your spouse plan on protecting your marriage? Again, the top thing that I would tell you that has come up over and over today is just make your connection with your partner your top priority. And if anything, it doesn't matter if that thing is right or wrong. If anything comes in between you and your partner or bothers your partner, end it. End it right away without hesitation, without question, without defensiveness. Just end it. And that is how you put your partner at peace. You just keep their mind at peace. So I hope you guys have enjoyed this episode. If you've agreed with me or disagreed with me, let me know through the YouTube comments or through a personal, private Instagram, Facebook message, whatever you want. I would love to hear from you and make me feel super connected to you guys as audience members. It would make the podcasting system two-way. You can also follow the Restoring Rapport podcast on Instagram and Facebook if you're interested in the content we post. So thank you guys so much for listening today, and we'll talk to you guys next time.